Hi, this is Amy Lewis. This is Engineers Unplugged. Hi, this is Amy Lewis, and we're back with another episode of Engineers Unplugged. I've got Mike and Matt, and usually we ask a question, but today we're making a bold declaration. Secure the infrastructure. What are we talking about? Matt, take it away.
Well, Mike Foley just brought up a great point in his session, just talking about how technology in securing the infrastructure is more complex than ever these days. And I just wanted to know, Mike, can we whiteboard this? Can we talk in more detail how this feels and talk about the people behind it? Because I think that's really the key element here.
Yeah, because what we're really talking about is not necessarily a technical discussion, it's political, it's people. That's really the crux of how to go off and go secure things.
Okay, so we've got one metric infrastructure. Let's say 2 hosts and some shared storage in between.
Yep.
And yeah, we've got our vCenter up here as always, and
right.
We've got to be connected to there. So ready, secure the infrastructure, go.
Well, you know, the first thing that people go off and go do when they say secure the infrastructure is you've got to define security, you've got to talk about trust. So the first thing that most people do is they go, okay, well, I've got VMs, so I'll install antivirus. I'll build a firewall around it, therefore I'm secure. Done. It's not always that. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot of moving pieces.
So I'm really curious, how does that conversation happen? Who are the moving parts inside your typical enterprise IT organization, the kind of customers you talk to, that when you're putting something together like the hardening guide that I know you work on, how does that play out in the individual worlds of the different jobs in the ecosystem?
Well, what usually happens is the IT guy is kind of charged with securing the infrastructure. The security guy gets a hold of my vSphere hardening guide, and he says, go off and go implement it.
Okay. Keep going.
And so the hardening guide is really a whole bunch of guidelines, not mandates, but guidelines. And one of the changes I made in the 5.5 hardening guide was to change this column called profiles into risk profiles, so that there's risk profile 1, 2, and 3. So risk profile 1 is 3-letter agencies, ultra-paranoid people, 2 is enterprise-level people, and 3 is just about everyone should do it. And then all of the guidelines are classified as 1, 2, 3, or a combination thereof.
Okay, so what kind of communication happens? I'm saying we've got a one metric security guy, and he's got Mike's Bible of security hardening, and he's passing it over to his probably confused IT guy and saying, go do this. Now, what does a hardening guide really offer? What's in there? You mentioned that there are 3 categories of it, right. But is this prescriptive? Is this an absolute, like, you should do all of these things? Or what is it going to be based on what part of the hardening guide is worth following for each organization?
Well, no one should go off and go implement blanket security policies. Right? Because you may impact the business. So for example, there are some guidelines in there that may impact doing something like backups, right? So it's really a risk management discussion. So the risk is, can I disable this setting, but it's going to break backups, which is more risky? Well, I think breaking backups is probably more risky than a obscure setting, which could be mitigated using a different technique.
Again, this has to do with people and the conversation between them to make sure that, number one, the business has to continue to run in a successful manner. And then number 2, we have to be compliant, because compliancy must be a huge part of what drives people this direction. And then 3, the risk calculation associated with that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, so one of the things I talked to a bunch of auditors recently in a panel discussion, and I said to them, it's time that security auditors get ahead of the curve. So we talk about mobility and all the different, everyone with iDevices and so forth, and Dropboxes and other types of file sharing things, is get ahead of the innovation. You don't want to be the guy who puts the no in innovation, right? And that is traditionally what the security guy has been. And so he turns into the person that's most difficult to work with, or he's the person who gets in the way of doing business. You can't get in the way of doing business. So what I'm trying to do is arm the IT guy to have the risk management discussion with the security guy to make him feel comfortable that this is okay.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, the hardening guy is way more than just a document that you pass to a security person and then they throw the pig over the fence, if you will, to the IT guy.
It's usually a cow with a trebuchet.
A cow with a trebuchet as well, very helpful in these days of war. But the document is really, it's a babble fish. It's going to help translate IT action into security, security needs into IT action and back and forth. So it can actually help mediate that conversation.
Right. So some vendors, some other organizations like U.S. government's DISA organization take the hardening guide as a basis for the controls that then say you need to go apply. Other partners like RSA have taken the hardening guide and use that as an authoritative source by which you can then go test against, and they've gone off and mapped that to all different regulations like PCI, for example.
Okay. I feel like I've got my head wrapped around it. It's really a conversation, and you're creating documentation for VMware specifically, but other organizations do this in order to have a dialogue across people. It's a people management process. So let's take all of this hardware layout that we were talking about, or mostly hardware, and in the software-defined world that we're really talking about, what does it look like, just quickly, if all of these are just VMDK files on one LUN somewhere, so we're getting more and more software-defined. What does that mean to security? Do you think we're going to continue to have enough nerd knobs that we need a document to translate it, or do you think there's going to be more inherency to security?
I think there will never be a shortage of nerd knobs, and it's documents like this that help define what knobs to turn or push.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, Mike, I feel much more informed on why I should pick up the work that you do and then implement it in an infrastructure, and I hope others appreciate that as well.
Okay, this was fantastic. We've actually not covered security extensively on Engineers Unplugged, so I'm really excited to have this in our.
Do this again.
We would love to have you back, but just to make sure we're secure, I think we need a secure unicorn. Go. Time to draw you.
I'm supposed to actually draw the unicorn.
I love that part. What will this unicorn be compromised?
My graphic designer wife would be killing me right now.
All right. So there you go. It's a secure unicorn. You can see there's a ninja star, there's jumping and kicking. So you can see it's a very involved process. That's a hardening guide for unicorns, so anybody can follow up.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Matt. We'll see you next time on Engineers Unplugged.